Hello, all. Good evening to this Sunday Samvad episode 10, and welcome. We are glad that we have the TIS alumni, Mr. Chinmaya Shah, with us from 2017 batch. And also, I welcome you all. Being a Sunday, we always have some, that Sunday blues, or what you can say, the weekend vibes. But we are glad that students do attend and give their presence and patience. So thank you for that. So we'll begin with introducing Mr. Chinmay. And so for first of all, before that, I'd like to introduce you all to Sunday Samvad for those who have not been attending. So this is an initiative by MyTIS. So MyTIS is a student-led media platform where it has various verticals, and out of which Sunday Samvad is one of the vertical where we welcome alumni from diverse work areas, TISS alumni who are working in various professional journeys, and they come and share their journeys and experiences with TISS students, and mostly it's on Sundays. So today we are on in our 10th episode, and we are glad to welcome Mr. Chinmaya Shah with us. So the 10th episode is about working with community-based organization, or you can say CBOs, in the rural Himalayas. And when we look at Mr. Chinmaya's profile, he is a native to the mountain state of Uttarakhand and has a deep interest in the developmental issues concerning the Indian Himalayan region. He did his post-graduation in social work, where the specialization was in Dalit and tribal studies and action, and passed out in 2017. His master's research was titled what you can say micro to macro level approach, I guess, and has been a part of, and that research has been a part of TICI journal recently published book called Land, Words and Resilient Cultures, the Ontological Basis of Tribal Identity. So, recognition at a academic level too. Currently, Mr. Chinmay holds the position as a program coordinator at the Institute of Himalayan Environmental Research and Education, in short, INHERI, which works on sustainable agriculture and entrepreneurship development in the Kumaon region of Uttarakhand Himalayas. It has been 3 years. Mr. Chinmay has been engaged with various community level work, and has played various roles there. His current project focuses on developing natural resource-based livelihood opportunities for the farmers in the hills. The project is even supported by MOIFCC, Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, under the aegis of Government of India, and also, encumbers under the scheme National Mission on Himalayan Studies, which has been recently started. So the profile obviously seems very interesting and focused, and it has been, as I said, 3 years Mr. Chinmay has been working there. So we are glad to welcome you, sir, and we look at a very what you can say the work you have done, sharing of knowing about your work, and there are various other aspects which Mr. Chinmay will talk about. So, sir, with your permission, we can begin.
Okay, thank you, Radesh. Thank you for that lovely introduction. Firstly, I would like to welcome everyone, every like juniors and fellow friends from this community. It's always good to connect with friends from this who are even remotely associated with this. It's really like a memorable experience. So I'll just share the presentation. So the introduction part has already been covered by Dadesh. So I'll be talking about my work experience of working with a community-based organization in Uttarakhand Himalayas, and the importance of working in the development sector in the emerging development sector in the Himalayas. So brief profile: after I graduated from TIS, I was a bit confused as to where I should work, because I really wanted to work somewhere back home. I belong to Uttarakhand. I grew up in the Himalayas. And although I wanted, there were options of working in the urban areas in Delhi and Bombay, but somewhere like I really wanted to work back home. And that's why I came back. I started with this Gurgaon-based organization, and which was actually working on disaster management issues and on workers issues related to migrant workers. So the area was largely near the Tibetan border in Joshimath. It's very close to Badrinath, if you can imagine that area. I was also working on forest-based livelihoods options. What are the possible forest-based livelihood options for the mountain communities? It was like a small association with this organization. Then I also started. I was also engaged in a PRA in disaster management with the same organization. After I left the organization, I started my own venture. It was called Mero Pahad Initiative, which is called My Mountains Initiative. So it basically was a digital platform focusing on promoting raw bamboo-based products, which was based by the traditional forest-dwelling communities of Uttarakhand Himalayas. So Ringal, it's called Ringal. It's from the family of bamboo, and I basically worked on upscaling and value addition of these traditional mountain products. So in the image you can see some of those products that I worked on. After that, 3 years back, I joined InHere. So a brief intro about InHere. InHere is one of the oldest community-based organizations in Uttarakhand. And just to give you a geographic context, it's located almost at the center of Uttarakhand. So it's 40 kilometers away from this famous hill station called Ranikhet, and 50 kilometers away from Ranikhet, and 40 kilometers away from Gairsand. So the Gairsand is like the summer capital, which was recently given that status. I think many of you might not be aware about it. So the organization's focus area has largely been in these 30-35 years has largely been on sustainable agriculture, livelihood generation, watershed development, and community awareness, especially catering to the women farmers of Uttarakhand Himalayas. The organization is located in village Chinoni, and it has also developed demonstrative working models on agriculture and agriculture-based businesses specific to the mountain communities. And I'll be sharing a bit some of the photos in the next slide as well. So 90% of the staff that work here is from the local community. They belong to the nearby villages. They come here and they work at different levels. They work at the administrative level. They work at the finance level, as project workers as well. So it's a purely community-based organization, which barring except some people like me who are from the outside, but I'm still from the Himalayan region only. Associations, the organization actually has partnered with a lot of international and international organizations. We have in the past partnered with the organizations from the US, European Union, South Asia, and especially in the Himalayan region. Also at the national level, we work closely with different ministries from the central government, the state government, and the public funded universities as well. We are also a partner of the United Nations FAO. It's called Mountain Partnership. So Mountain Partnership is actually a platform of organizations and communities who are from different mountain regions of the world. So be it say Latin America or say Europe or say Asia, it's like a global platform developed by the FAO. And also recently we trained farmers and extension officers from the Kingdom of Bhutan on agriculture and allied agricultural activities and and business opportunities that they can develop back home in their country. So these are some of the demonstrative working units. We have a small seed bank which conserves traditional mountain seeds. We have a small working food grain processing unit as well, a fruit processing unit, and poultry unit. There's a Ayurved Shala. It basically caters to the medicinal and aromatic plants that we find across the Himalayan region. And then there's like a fish unit as well. So all these units are basically for demonstration, and these are for the farmers, for the mountain farmers. They come here, they get trained, and we have created these in a way so that they can go back home and then replicate these kinds of structures, these kinds of business models for themselves as well. My current engagement with InHere I'll talk brief on that. So, as Darish said, my work is largely focus on developing natural resource-based livelihood opportunities. And so I'm working in the Dudhatoli forest. It's in the Chamoli district. And basically we are working on creating micro enterprises based on availability of surplus natural produce, and also on developing allied agricultural activities, say poultry, fishery, and integrated vegetable farming as well. So all this process involves value addition of the agriculture produce, developing supply chain models, addressing the weak points, and then also helping them in the rural marketing as well. So again, this has been supported by the National Mission on Himalayan Studies under the and also it's a Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. It's a flagship project by the Ministry of Environment. I also have an active role at the administrative level as well. So for the activities that are to be done, a lot of road mapping has to be done. So let's say from the planning part to the implementation part, let's say allocating the budget for that particular activities, or whether it needs a certain sort of trainings for the farmers or for the staff members, and also monitoring the entire activities. So at the administrative level, I have these kinds of roles. I also work on networking with other organizations, government departments, and I also work closely with research institutions, not only for project activities but also for resource mobilization. So I'll give you like a brief example. Let's say farmers need say traditional good quality mountain seed, and I'll so we skill-based trainings. I'm also conducting workshops. In another project in the same organization, I am working on developing seed bank entrepreneurs for biodiversity conservation. This basically, so Uttarakhand is one of the most biodiverse regions in Uttarakhand, and so we through this we aim on not only conserving traditional mountain seeds but also making it linking it as a business model, so that the farmers can earn their livelihood as well. Also, if the existing there are existing farmer setups who need certain kind of support in terms of training, or maybe in terms of say resources, we help them connect with the government and other institutions as well. Also, the documentation part is there. I take care of the audio visual text documentation, be it the reporting part. I take care of that as well. I also engage on advocacy. So because in the previous slide I talked about I'm working on sustainable agriculture and livelihood opportunities. One of our food processing units that makes Amaranth Laddu. Amaranth is basically Rajgira, Cholai, Ramdana, that we call it in, I think, in Maharashtra region. So these group of women entrepreneurs, they make Cholai Laddu. And so we actually worked with the local block education department, and we were able to link it with the midday meal program. So 2 Wednesdays of every month, the kids in 5 model schools, the kids were supplied with Amaranth laddus. And that actually, when we did that, that actually incentivized the women farmers, because they had like a constant market for them, at least in the pre-COVID times. And because the women got incentivized, they had to procure more of raw material. So that actually incentivized the farmers to grow more amaranth. So in a way, we were able to cater to the agriculture part as well, but also to the entrepreneurship part as well. And also simultaneously, we were able to provide nutritious food, supplementary food to the kids as well. Simultaneously, in my organization, I am working on a residential knowledge center as well. So we have a small library here in this organization. It has like a good amount of old literature in about the mountain regions, and particularly on the Himalayas. And hopefully it will get materialized soon. So researchers and scholars can come here, and pay a minimum fee, and then also engage in research. And also you can also engage in skill sharing with the community as well. So it will be like a two-way exchange. Apart from this organization, I work where I am also associated with Shepherds of Himalayas. I think Shepherds of Himalayas is the digital platform which shares stories about the mountain communities, especially the shepherding and the pastoralist communities across the Himalayan region. It's a very interesting platform. We work closely with development professionals and community members from across the Himalayan states, and we bring out the stories. So I would request you to look for this website as well and read the story. Like a really good effort that has been initiated in the Himalayan region. Okay, so that was like the good part. Let's talk about the challenges that and limitations that we face while working in the Himalayas at a professional level, because the kind of development Himalayas has seen, and this is largely with my experience of working in the Uttarakhand Himalayas. The development has been so largely uneven that it has led to the lack of human resources. So because of these cities, the most of the educated people have migrated, or the skilled labor have migrated to the urban areas and have concentrated at a particular level. And because of this, there's a lack of human capital, skilled human capital in the Himalayan region. So most of the time, we struggle finding this professional people to get done so help us with the project activities at the organization level or at the field level as well. It does affect us at the professional level. Because of this, it actually affects our pace of work as well. Because as a development professional, a lot of my time and energy is deployed on while communicating with people and organizations and clients who are based in these industrial regions, let's say in Delhi or in Bombay or in, let's say, in Dehradun. And because of that, because they have like a very client-centric, time-bound approach, they will deliver the services or the product at the end of the day. But when you contextualize that with the agricultural economy, and because the larger things happen in the village based on what is happening in the fields, and because the community members and maybe the staff members are like in tune with the larger agriculture economy, it's really it takes actually a lot of energy to struggle between both the clients and with the staff members and the community members as well, because the level of work, the time, the delivery, that again gets affected. And no one is to be blamed, but that is something, while working with two different economies and two different sectors, that actually affects the quality of work as well. Because of this, resource mobilization is a challenge in the mountain areas, because like depends. So because there's a large, the Himalaya entire region is largely agriculture based. We don't have service based industries. So if we want a certain sort of say equipment, agriculture equipments or agriculture support materials, or let's say even resource persons as well, the nearest industrial area or the urbanized area is like 150 or 200 kilometers away. And because of that actually takes a lot of time and money and energy as well. And at times it delays the project as well. Because of the mountain terrain, because of mobility issue is something which is needed to be addressed here, because it actually impacts our field engagement. So I remember talking to my friends who work in Delhi NCR or maybe in other urbanized regions as well. So the amount of time they invest in in visiting their field and getting the work done and then coming back, it can be actually planned, because the roads are connected, you have like a better sense of mobility and better transportation services. In the Himalayas, it is a problem, because like in my project area currently, there are certain villages which are like 6-7 kilometers away from the nearest roadhead. So you have to actually hike to those villages, get get your meetings done, and then come back. And while returning back, you might not get the transport. So most of the time, that has happened to me. I find myself in the middle of nowhere, just walking with my stuff. Like looking for a transport. So these are things that we development professionals face at the professional level. At the personal level, yes, because if you are entering in a community-based organization, it's probably you must have been educated in an urban setup, or maybe in the nearest hill town, which is still more urbanized than a community-based organization, where the organization is based. So there's a huge change in lifestyle, Because for me, I moved from Bombay, then I moved to Chinoni. It's like a total village setup. So that was a certain side kind of shock for me, to adjust to that rural lifestyle in the beginning. And because there's a change of lifestyle, that actually affects our way of socialization as well. There's so we don't get the kind of luxuries that we get in small towns and cities, and that actually, in a way affects you as well, because maybe like after like 8 to 10 hours of working, you need certain that kind of socialization as well, but you don't get that kind of things in a rural setup. And because the point one and two, lifestyle and meaning of socialization changes, that actually impacts the level of motivation as well, because you can't really separate the personal and the professional, from each other. If you are not motivated, you won't be able to focus on the on your on professional goals as well. And also there are mobility issues as well, because usually the projects in the Himalayas are way inside, way remote. It takes time. So if you want to like travel to meet your friends or family, you have to actually plan it out way ahead, because you have to look for the transport, because maybe after like 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock in the evening, you won't find anything. But that being said, Himalayas are a wonderful place to work, but it's really important that I address certain things, that I address the importance of geography here, as we were discussing earlier. If you have like decided that you want to work in the Himalayas, just decide an area and just take some books and just know what Himalayas are. Just understand what Himalayas actually are. So Himalayas are not something that we see when we go to, let's say, Manali or Nainital or Darjeeling, or maybe at any other hill station. It's not like a group of snow-capped mountains. It's not like that. It's one of the most culturally diverse regions in the world, and it has its own different realities as well. So geographically, the Himalayas cover, within the Indian state covers, the Jammu Kashmir, the Western Himalayas can be the Jammu Kashmir state, Himachal, Uttarakhand. The central Himalayas is the entire Nepal part. Then in the eastern Himalayas, you have the Darjeeling districts and the entire northeastern states, still Tripura. So this is the entire Himalayan region. So when we talk about working in the Himalayas, it's not limited to just one or two states. It's the entire belt. It's a huge belt. So it's important for the development professional, if you are trying to work in the Himalayas, look for these categories. Understand the socio-economic and political climate of the regions. At the society level, just understand whether is the community homogeneous, is it homogeneous, or who are the different caste groups that are working there, or who are the different tribes, and how's the caste and tribes related to each other, how they're engaging with each other, and what is the role of religion in that region, and how does gender operates, and what are the gender roles, what happens to the gender roles in the mountain regions. And also it's also important to understand that is it something which is very similar to that we see in the plains region. Is it something very similar? Because let's say we have a background of work in, say, Maharashtra or in Madhya Pradesh or in Rajasthan. You know that how the realities are in that kind of setup, but that will be a bit challenging and problematic and not accurate enough to use that lens to visualize the Himalayas, because Himalayan communities and the setups are way different than we see in the mainlands. At the economic level, one needs to understand and read up on who owns the resources, which community owns the resources, who has the access to these resources, and what is the relevance of these mountains in the lives of the locals, and how does that affect their worldview? Is this like a piece of mountain, or does that geography has like a larger role to play in their daily lives? And also you need to question, what is development in the Himalayas, because we see a lot of developmental project that has come up here. We see the Char Dham project coming up in the Himalayas. We see the extension of roads in the northeastern region. We see the entire dams building up in the Himalayas. So is it the kind of development that the mountain communities are seeking? And what is their role in that entire process? That is something which you need to question and read up on that as well. At the political level, read up on, does the mountain communities have same political rights as people who are in other parts of the community? We know what's happening in Kashmir. We know what's happening in say in say northeastern states, let's say in Manipur. So we need to take into consideration those realities as well. Also, what is their space in decision making? Are they even considered? Are they even consulted in even decision making, or whether their identities are compromised, or who takes the ownership of the resources that has been traditionally given to these communities, but suddenly because of some development projects it doesn't belong to them. What happens to that? Also, what happens to the communities, and what happens to the borders, because the Himalayan region is like a huge is like a link between, it separates a lot of communities, let's say countries like China, Myanmar, Bhutan, and so state acts very differently. So one needs to also understand how a state functions at the borders and what happens to the communities over there. That being said, there are a lot of future opportunities. So if you are thinking of working in a community-based organization, there are certain benefits that you might get in terms of experiences. So if you work in a community-based organization, it will not only help you engage with the grassroots level experiences as well, but also help you with the policy level work as well, because you will be at the receiving end of seeing how the policy works at the ground level. You'll be able to interact with communities. You'll be able to see whether there are any faults with the policy or not. And CBOs actually act as like a direct link between the development professional and the community. So that is a perfect space for to dialogue and discuss, and then to implement things as well. Also, you while working with the community-based organizations, you get to work on on diverse intersectional themes. It can be on issues, let's say, on waste management, on, let's say, hotel industry, on hospitality sector, on, let's say, climate change, on, say, livelihood, on FRA, the Forest Rights Act, or maybe in different or, let's say, issues related to many other things as well. So it's really important that you engage in a process of documentation as well, because the realities in the mountains are continuously changing, and there might be some sort of event that is happening there might be happening at the village level as well. So with the consent of the community, try to document it, because you will be actually adding to the literature of the Himalayan region. Because of your, and again, because of your position in the community-based organization, you will be involved in a lot of decision-making process. You'll have that power. So, and you'll be able to see the direct impact of your decisions. So maybe you plan something, and the next day or the next week that gets delivered, and the community doesn't accept that. You'll immediately get the answer from the community. So that actually helps you to introspect as well, that although you know a lot of things, great, you have this theoretical understanding, great, but if it's not connecting with the community, then you need to introspect your decisions and planning as well. Simultaneously, while working with a community-based organization, it helps you to enable the community to become decision makers. You help them, you empower them. It's really important that if you have decided to work with a community-based organization, you spend some time training and sharing knowledge with the staff members, and also with the community members as well. Because that will also help you in institution building as well. Because what happens that as development professionals, we tend to move quickly with the kind of job opportunities that we get. But till the time you are there in the community, it's really important that, or in the organization, it's important that you invest in the organization, invest in the people, invest in the community, so that when you leave, the community will stay there and they will have the resources. And then maybe in the coming time they will teach two more people, and those people will teach two more people. So in a way, your skill will get transferred, and that will actually help in empowering the community. Also, as I said earlier, CBO helps you in in quantifying your work, in diversifying your work, in, let's say, administration, implementation part, logistics part, planning part, and documentation part as well. Also, now, so what are these particular openings that you can see and you can tap into? So you'll be in community-based organizations, you will be basically engaged as a community project coordinator, or as a resource person in one of the projects that the organization might be implementing. Secondly, you can also work as a research assistant in the government funded program. So as I said earlier, National Mission on Himalayan Studies is working closely with different state governments, different organizations, and it's a huge project. So look into the the NMHS website, see what possible openings are there. If you want to engage into the research, into research work as well. Also, you can also work as a resource person, for government projects. So we have the livelihood missions working across the Himalayas. Each state will have its own livelihood mission. So look into that as aspect as well. Simultaneously, if you don't want to work with the community, but you still want to explore the area, you can also work as an independent researchers as well, because on particularly mountain specific issues, because the issues have these are emerging issues, and these needs to be studied, these need to be discussed, analyzed, debated at the policy level. So it's really important that you contribute to the research part as well. Just a small note, there's a difference that while looking for the community-based organization, see if it's a proper community-based organization or maybe an extension office to organization that might be within the plains, let's say in Delhi or let's say in Bombay or Bangalore. Because what happens a lot of the times is that these are like extension offices, and a lot of decision making actually takes place from the plains. And so if you are getting associated for like a small period, it's okay. You can work with these extension offices. But if you are looking for like a longer engagement, search for a community-based organization in the Himalayas. Now, what are the skills that you require? Uh, so at the advanced skills can be GIS. I'm pretty sure the second year students might be studying, maybe some people in second year courses might be studying this. GIS is like really important. Back in this, I didn't know the importance of GIS, but now in the field level, I think it's like really important. Have a good understanding of MS Office. MS Office is something, it's not that, you're able to make a PPT and you're able to present it in front of the class. No, excel on that. Craft your MS Office skills, and that will actually help you, and in training other people as well. Also, there are a lot of productivity apps as well, or productivity software as well, that might help you in easing your day-to-day work. Teach these productivity softwares. Once you have done that, teach this to the committee members, because in a way that will help you. That will
Okay, so I guess there is a network issue with the speaker. Um, I think, can people hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, I think he has joined again. Hello. I guess so. We are trying to contact. I guess there is some internet issue. The participant can just wait for some time. Yeah. Okay. Can
Sure, you
some
can.
of you?
Sure. You can pause the recording too.
Yeah. Thank you, Kumail. Thank you.
So yeah, so there are a lot of productivity apps that you can because you need to teach this to the community members, because in the longer run, when you teach these skills to them, that will actually boost your productivity, because you rely heavily on your staff members for data and everything. You can also learn some digital skills as well. Look for apps like Canva and other online apps. So most of the time, you these having a knowledge on how to make e-posters, or let's say pamphlets, or even type Hindi. That is a skill. So so when I joined here, typing, everything was to be done delivered in Hindi. Let's say from presentations to documents to everything. So Hindi was like really important. So there are like there are a bunch of tools that are available online that will actually help you out. Also, you need to learn on you need to know about the social media tools as well, because these are certain things which is so obvious to us. But if we can really contextualize these and deliver at the field, these can help us in, let's say, advocacy, documentation, or maybe in rural marketing as well. uh, okay, in the documentation skills, there boost your writing skills, uh, boost your photography. So if you know photography, if you love taking photographs, craft your skills. If you know how to make small videos, that will be like really helpful. And again, teach these to the community, because most of the time the community will be there in the when the actual event might be taking place, and they will actually help you document it and deliver it to you. And because you can't be there all the time. Now soft skills can be public speaking. It mainly involves, because most of the time you'll find yourself talking to different government officers, or maybe addressing a village meeting, or maybe addressing the staff meeting. So it's really important you work on public speaking, have command over the working languages such as Hindi and English. I think these will work. You can't really learn the native languages, but I think these things will really work. Translation and communication techniques are the added advantages. And okay, so knowledge gained at test and its applicability. So whatever the experience that you will gain in test in 2 years, I think that will heavily benefit you in at all terms. Because of the knowledge that and experiences and the discussion that you have had in test. You'll be able to see not at the larger macro level structures, but also the micro level structures. Whether there's a fault in planning, or maybe there's a fault in delivery. You'll able to analyze that with the knowledge that you gain from tests. And because of tests, you will be studying in tests for 2 years. That will actually give you an access to a huge network. Your friends will be future professional development professions, and they'll be working with a diverse group of people. Access these kinds of networks, because they'll be helping you in your work. Like, I heavily rely on my friends and their colleagues for inputs, because as I said earlier, there's always a resource crunch. So again, and it's just, friends are always a call away. So rely on that. Talk to your professors, talk to other scholars. And this gives you that space. Also, if you plan things well, that it will have a huge impact at the ground level, because of the knowledge and your position in the CBO. Use it for the benefit of the people. Also take the campus teachings and fieldwork seriously, because I was able to work in the Himalayas for so long, because I took my fieldwork in rural Maharashtra and rural Assam seriously, and that actually acquainted me with a lot of things that happen at the ground level. um, Lastly, use it to add value to the people. Train people, give them skills, respect them. And with whatever things that you can transfer from yourself to the community, I think that will actually only benefit the community and only benefit the larger society at the end. Now that you have decided the community, now you know your skills, there'll be certain problems that you might face while working in the field. So when you approach the organization, go through the annual reports, talk to the existing employees, just learn about the core values of the community based organization, so that you can relate with the issues and learn about the issues. Even while delivering the projects, always try to engage in a dialogue, because you will be working with a diverse group of people, and the community don't need to be, they are not politically correct like we are, when we are in tests, or while we talk to people who are from tests. Okay, so take into consideration what they are saying, and at least understand what their arguments are, because you need to contextualize where they're coming from. And whatever you say, irrespective of the fancy test degree that you have, you need your, whatever you use, whatever you say, that needs to cut across through gender, caste, and geography. Don't think that, okay, fine, you know a lot of things, certain things worked perfectly in other places. I don't think that will actually happen in the mountains. You need to contextualize these, and you need to use the language of the people. Also, you need to draw a fine line between your beliefs and your value systems. You don't need to compromise these. And because, just always think of, when in trouble, always think of of the larger goal. What is the larger goal of the project, or the larger goal of the organization? What are the values? And even just try to make the other person understand that, okay, fine, we have our differences, but let's keep our differences aside, let's agree to disagree, and let's work on this, let's work on the issue. Also, be inclusive in decision making. You at least, if you can't solve the issue, just try to address it. At the end, respect the community, because they are like way more experience, and they will help you out in times of crisis, while your development work and while you are associated with the organization. Now, concluding note, Himalayas are a wonderful place. Although it tends to, because of the geography, it tends to isolate regions, people, nations, and ideologies, but there are a lot of commonalities, there are a lot of shared experiences, there's a lot of learning that actually takes place at the village level. And people, if you are working in Uttarakhand, you can always collaborate with someone who are in Darjeeling, or let's say who is in Kashmir, or let's say who is in Manipur, because there's like a common thread, that is the Himalayas, and that will actually help you with your developmental work. Working in the Himalayas also gives you a grassroots perspective of the realities of mountain communities, and also of the mountain regions. Why certain things doesn't work in certain geographies. Working in the Himalayas teach you that as well. Lastly, as the popular pop culture quote says, if the mountains are calling, you should go, but get your readings done properly. Because don't go to the community or the organization with a sense of this savior attitude that, okay, you are from this and you know things. No, it's not about that. Learn about the community, learn about the region, and I think that will be really beneficial for you, for the community, and for the organization as well. Okay, questions. If there are any questions, please, we can have some questions. Do we have time? I'm sorry, technical thing. I think something happened. Wrong happened with the connection. So do we have the question time?
So you did not know that the connection was lost?
Sorry?
You did not know the connection was lost?
No, I did not know whether the connection
God.
was lost. I was like, okay, fine, everything is changa se. So,
is there any reason behind putting the quote behind the questions?
Yeah, because I find this pic really, really beautiful and really interesting, and that it gives you that sense of awe that that, okay, fine, people are looking forward to questions. So that's,
curiosity.
This image.
Yeah. By the way, we have already got compliments about the presentation in the chat box, and even I personally found it very interesting and engaging. So thank you for the presentation, first of all, and thank you for the the structure that you went through, and for the inputs. I think there are some questions on the chat box. We can take them. There is,
Yeah, time.
yeah, I think there was one question before this also, but because of the connect, I also lost my connection in between. Can anyone repost the question that was put? I cannot see it. There was a question. I think even here's the question. Thank you, Lavanya. So the person is telling, how does the organization arrive on a mutual consensus with the community for choosing the projects that benefit all the stakeholders involved? I think you said something about how you can select the project and community interaction. If there is something you want to comment on this.
Okay, so with certain projects, when we develop a project, whenever in the beginning of the project you go to the field, you ask the community, you do a baseline, whether there are certain issues that are needed to be addressed, whether the community really wants to participate in that project development process or not. Like for example, in one of the projects that we developed for NABARD, we firstly we went to the community. We did a basic survey. We held these village level meetings, and then we told them, okay, that this is the project, and this is the organization, and these are the deliverables, and this is the time frame, and this is your contribution. So, do you want to participate in this process or not? So it's not like that suddenly. That suddenly you make a project and then you deliver it on the people. Although during these meetings, not all members of the community or from the village might participate because it's not possible practically, but then you engage with the main stakeholders, let's say Gram Pradhan or the elderly, or the main beneficiaries, or the target group. So in a way, you do that thing in the beginning of the beginning of the project, and then you arrive at a mutual consensus.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for, I guess the answer, the participant got the answer. And the second is, Tanya asked that what is the current situation of the digital divide in Himalaya? Is there any gender bias? So yeah, digital, now digital has become a, what you can say, a stakeholder or a resource, both. So yeah, any comments on that?
Digital divide and gender bias.
Yeah, first, like what is the digital divide actually on the grassroots, as well as some gender aspects to it?
Okay, so I think in recent years, digital the entry of the digital media and digital connection has been, the digital infrastructure has rapidly developed in the Himalayas. At least like in the Uttarakhand region where I was earlier working near the Tibetan border, we had like a very poor net connectivity. There are areas which are like blanked out. But in recent years, I used to get a call from the community members that, sir, bhaiya, yahan ab net aa gaya hai, and now they were doing this video call. And now that is something, because now they are getting access to the technology, they are getting access to the resources which maybe people from other parts of the state or region are getting familiar with. So they have the digital penetration has taken over in the Himalayas. The infrastructure is somewhere, thoda weak, like you just witnessed in this presentation. But overall, it is, it's working fine these days. And in terms of gender bias, I don't see. There's always gender bias, because at the end of the day, who has the phone? Who gets to hold the phone? Who and whether the women are allowed to take the phone in the fields, and who actually whether they have to depend for the money on their partners to get the internet recharge done. But again, in the rural Himalayas, at least in Uttarakhand, the demography is such that it's maximum, it's the women farmers, and they are more adaptable to the digital technology. Because in my current project as well, I am also focusing on telling them how to market using WhatsApp or through digital mediums. So that is something I am currently working on, taking into consideration that there's a larger population which has some sort of familiarity with the digital mediums.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely understand that. So there is another question by Mr. Lavanya and Kumail. Okay, so Any organization, Kumer asked that any organization working in climate change mitigation and adaptation you're aware
Sorry?
of? Any organization that works in the areas of climate change mitigation and adaptation?
Dadish, I would like to correct. It's not any like. Does your organization work in climate change and
Okay.
adaptation?
Okay, does your okay? I'm sorry. So,
My organization, not particularly, but in some way or the other, you can't escape the larger environment and the larger ecology that actually is an essential part of any developmental project in the Himalayas. We might at present we are not currently working on climate change, but maybe as a sub project we might be dealing with one of the components. So in my current project we have done a lot of plantation, and we have also done a lot of plantation based on the fodder availability. So in the Dudhatoli region where I currently work, it's a small meadow where the entire villagers take the livestock for grazing during the summer months. So we did a lot of plantation activities, not only of grass but also of fodder trees. So that in a way we were able to address the larger climatic issues as well, because if there's a lack of biomass in the meadow, that will actually affect the water availability in downstreams, or maybe in the longer run. So in a way, every project in the Himalayas will be somewhere related to the environment and to climate change adaptation.
Okay, thank you. So I just wanted to ask one more thing. Like, if you see, most of the NGOs, they are situated, towards the down south, like towards the towards Himachal border or towards Bihar, like towards this south side. I mean, towards coming towards. But like when coming towards the Tibet side, there are so many ghost villages. There is no NGOs involved. All the villages people have basically migrated to the south side, coming towards. Like, why is it so? Like, why like what can be done, according to you? Because there's a lot of empty, villages. And like, speaking of international relations, so even China is taking advantage of that, because we know that mountain peoples, they are the second defense, after army and all. So I mean, this is
See, now, as I said earlier in the earlier slides, the kind of development that the Himalayas has seen, has witnessed, especially in the Uttarakhand Himalayas, that has been largely uneven. We have the industrialized districts. The Plains district is highly industrialized. We have the industrialized centers, but then again, that has actually aided in the migration process. So although what can be done, I really don't know, because people migrate to other places because they have aspirations, because they want a better living, because they want better facilities. If your model, or if your approach is able to create some sort of structures or some sort of examples, and which is feasible for those regions, maybe 1% of the population might adapt to it, or might adopt it. But thinking that the larger community will actually accept it is a bit of a challenge, because the problem is that the kind of skills all these people are engaged in, we get trained, our educational sector trains us in those kinds of skills which largely cater to the industrialized sector, to the industrialized economy, to the urban sectors, and nothing caters to the agriculture part. So in a way, we are training people for an economy that is not based on the economy of the mountains, that is largely agricultural. So in a way, even if you put good facilities or good services, if it's not somewhere related to what the skills that person has, he or she will probably migrate. You can't do anything about it. And that's organizations will be there, but if there is no community, how will they work?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So thank you so much, Chinmay. I think Kumer, and if you have some follow-up, you can anyways talk through the email IDs that will be maybe provided. But before taking some questions on the chat box, we'll definitely take them. There are some questions which people asked in the Google form also, and even one of the questionnaire person is in the meeting also, Mr. Mudit. So Mr. Mudit asks that in the wake of pandemic, there has been a tremendous return of manpower back to their villages. Do you see it as a long-term solution to the problem of youth migration that has been haunting Uttarakhand hills since years? If yes, if it is a solution that they are coming back, or what you can say reverse migration, what you can think that this reverse migration can be dealt with, and how can we like attract these youths to stay and contribute or work in Uttarakhand itself?
So what actually happened was due to pandemic, uh, a lot of the communities, the working class community migrated from the industrial centers, whether they were working in Delhi NCR region or maybe in Dehradun or in Haridwar in factories. They actually returned back. So in the districts like Pauri and and Almora, they saw the highest reverse migrants. So around 3.5 lakh youth actually came back. But the problem is, they won't be staying for long, as as that it will happen in other regions as well. Because we did like a small study also, and there were this report by the Uttarakhand Palayan Ayog as well, that most of the people are actually waiting for the economy and the pandemic to get over and then join back. Because again, that is what I explained in the previous question, that they have been trained for an economy that doesn't serve the purpose of the mountain regions. No, if had they been trained for an agricultural economy, have they been trained in the skills that requires certain agriculture-based industries or agriculture-based livelihood opportunities, say poultry, fishery, vegetable farming, advanced type of vegetable farming, small, that involves, not extensive agriculture, but the kind of agriculture that we see in the mountain regions. If the government focus on that, then I think in the longer run, we can actually see some section of people staying back. Because even with the Palayan Ayog report, it only said that only 5 to 10% of the people will stay back, and the rest will actually migrate. Because most of the people, let's say in Uttarakhand, they work in the hospitality sector, or maybe in the spice sector. So you don't have any industries in the mountains. You'll definitely migrate. So maybe the long-term solution for the governments and for the organizations working in the Himalayas can be to actually create models based on the larger agriculture economy, make it sustainable. Help them with linking with the government policies, government subsidies, and at least work with the existing population that is there in the Himalayas. Don't start your work with those who have actually returned back. Because let's say if there are like 100 people in a village, 100 households in a village, 80% have migrated, 20% are somewhere somehow they're doing the agriculture. So at least start with supporting those people first, rather than tapping to those 80 households. Because again, migration is like a smoke screen that is used in Uttarakhand. If we need to declutter that, look at what's happening in the village. Who are the people who are actually struggling with agriculture? Support them first. If they sustain, obviously people, they know what's happening to them in the plains. They don't have good working conditions. They are not getting good money. They know, okay, my relative or my neighbor is doing something good in the village. Fine, I'll go back and do something. So create models in the village with the existing with the people that we have in the Himalayas. Don't work for the largest chunk of people, because you never know, whether they will stay or not.
Thank you. And even Kumer mentioned a saying that Uttarakhand ki pani और जवानी दोनों उत्तराखंड को नहीं मिलती.
Absolutely, that happens.
Yeah, saying that is obviously there. So there is one Miss Lavanya is there, and she has asked one question on the Google form and 2 questions on the chat box. Which and I think two are linked with the gender-based knowledge. So Miss Lavanya, which one you would like to ask? The one on the Google form or those on the chat box?
You can ask the chat box ones. That's, I think, the same only.
Yeah. So okay, thank you. So Ms. Lavanya asked that I'll take first this one, that in Ineri there is a food processing unit and seed bank. Can you tell me if there is any delineation of knowledge based on gender? I mean, using indigenous knowledge of women for empowering them. So is there any project that in the seed bank that works with the women or utilizing women's knowledge?
See, So the larger people that we have, the larger working population that we have in the Himalayas are women. So and the seed bank actually incorporates whatever the knowledge systems are there of these mountain women. So a lot of inputs that we get for the seed bank is from these women farmers, and not particularly in food processing, because food processing is more of a like a advanced industry. But like in let's say seed conservation, the lot of knowledge is taken from the feedback from by the community members, and they are largely women. That actually helps in storage, preservation, and then grading. We just use that knowledge and upscale it so that we can teach that to other farmers as well.
Yeah, I hope Miss Lavanya you got the answer. And there is another. I'm sorry. There is another. I think some questions on the Google Forms are also there, which I think the limitations of working and the scope of NGOs in Himalayan region. I think those you have covered in the presentation. The challenges faced while working with farmers, I guess even that is also covered. I think this is the last question where Mr. Lavanya asked that about the project Shepherds of Himalayas, as it is you are exploring to document traditional and ecological knowledge. How are you going to use it for community development? So like the project Shepherds is there, and how are you going to, you're trying to delineate knowledge based on, you're trying to document traditional and ecological knowledge, exploring, through that project. How are you going to use it for community development? That is the question, I guess.
Well, that's a really interesting question. So Shepherds of Himalayas is something I am individually a part of, and it's started by like a group of development professionals and academicians who are working in the Himalayan region. As of now, we are just planning to at least document the knowledge, document the issues, document their the kind of realities and challenges that the shepherding and the nomadic communities face, be it, let's say, access to the grazing lands, or maybe the problems that they face, let's say, on wool cutting, whether there are any government support measures, or whether they are any support measures by the government to actually develop the handicraft or handloom industry, and what is the awareness of the community about those knowledge, about those schemes and government support measures. So as of now, we are just in the process of documentation, and I hope in the long run, when we have a sufficient knowledge and a sufficient team, maybe those who have initiated the project might actually able to take it to another level and use it, make a proper project and help in community development.
Thank you. Thank you for your answers, Chandra.
Yeah.
Yes,
Thank you
can
so
I
much.
ask one last question? If
Yeah,
you don't
Kola,
mind?
you can. I hope it's the last, I guess.
Okay, it's last. So I wanted to ask, while incorporating scientific knowledge with the local knowledge, or you can say the tribal knowledge or indigenous knowledge, so there is a challenge from both the sides, because the scientific knowledge, they say that local knowledge is it's not based on the facts. I mean, we have studied, we have, used hardware, software, everything. But the local knowledge, on the other hand, say they have, experience from their ancestors, they have been living in that route, since ages, and they know. So do you see this, when you work in when you work at the ground level, do you see that there's a mismatch? Like, if there is a mismatch, how do you cope with that?
See, again, there at times is a mismatch, because we the educated class, we the development professionals, we think that because we educated in a university, we have the scientific temper, we know how to address the solutions, and we have the solutions to the problems of the communities, and we use that sense of approach. We don't do our readings, and what happens is that at the end of the day, that those things fall flat. Fine, you make a project, you make everything, you do the field work, you do everything, you train the community, but that will not get implemented, and in that manner, you will be proven wrong by your experiences as well. That the same experience, if you try to impose these kinds of things on the community, firstly the community will themselves tell you that see, this is not going to work. But again, if you are trying to enforce it, I think in the long run you will get to know the overall result. because again, if you're not taking into consideration the local knowledge, the traditional communities knowledge, and the experiences, and their realities, and the problems that they have faced, and the possible solutions that they're offering, you are on the wrong side of the project. You need to take into consideration the local community experiences while delivering, while even, let's say, planning a project or maybe delivering the project. It has to be like a common knowledge sharing thing, and that is one way you can actually successfully deliver activities and large contribute to the development of the region and to the communities as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. I hope so. I think we are at the conclusion of the session, and I personally also felt that or reflected that the session was interesting and comprehensive enough to understand a person who has not been into the Himalayas without I guess Mussoorie. And for me also it has been so much comprehensive, so I can definitely understand people who actually belong to that place can how much relate and even learn and unlearn from your not just experiences and journeys, but also your reflections on your own work, and how can TISS students now approach the opportunities, the limitations, the challenges, the skills, and what not. So I again thank you for not just your time, but even your effort towards making the presentation, because presentation is also being so much appreciated by the participants. And I even thank all the participants for their patience, for their questions, and for their very interesting response to Mr. Chinmaya. And I think this kind of intellectual, or what you can say, engaging conversations only lead us to the betterment of the community as well as for our professional journey. And I'm very glad, sir, Chinmaya sir, that you have taken out so much time for us, and we sure will be in connect. There are many students who are from my classmates, from social work, from other schools who had to attend, but this is the last. So next week is the last week, so students are in their assignments, but they do wish to connect with you on LinkedIn through emails, post their questions. So I hope we have your permission to share your email ID with those who want to connect with you.
Yeah, you can.
Yeah.
Feel
Thank you
free
so
to
much.
call me, text me, email me, if you have any queries. And we'll be happy to connect.
Thank you so much. And that is also one of our
everyone.
3 purposes of Sunday Samvad, that to build a network which is between TISS students and alumni, and thus students can channelize their professional aspirations through some guidance and mentoring, as well as some experiences and journeys like you. So sir, thank you all. Thank you, sir. Thank you for the time. We are glad. Stay tuned to mytis.com. We'll be uploading the video on mytis TV on YouTube also. And any questions, any queries, any issues, you can all connect to me. My number is posted on the posters and on YouTube. And sir, we hope we stay in connect and build the connection stronger.
For sure. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.